If you believe old age is the cruelest fate a woman can face, then you have never known the sting of being unwanted in your own home. People think wrinkles hurt, or weak bones, or fading memory. But what hurts deeper is when the children you raised with love look at you like you are nothing more than weight on their shoulders. I learned this one cold evening in my kitchen, the night my legs failed me and the truth finally revealed itself like a wound torn open. The pot of stew slipped first. My hand trembled just slightly, but it was enough. Boiling water spilled over my leg and I gasped, knees buckling. My hip cracked against the floor, not loud, but heavy, the kind of sound that carries shame more than pain. My cheek pressed into the tiles, cold and smelling faintly of detergent. For a moment I wasn't a mother or grandmother, just an old woman on the floor with no strength to rise. I tried to pull myself up using the counter edge, but the pain stabbed like a hot needle inside my bones and I froze there, helpless. Footsteps approached. My son, Tyler, walked in with a slowness that felt intentional. No alarm, no rush, no mother instinct in him anymore. He stared down at me with a crooked smile that did not belong to the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. "Would you look at that?" he said, nudging the spoon near my hand with his shoe. "Old things always find their place on the ground." His words fell like stones, each one breaking something soft inside me. If he had just sighed or helped me sit, maybe this story would have ended differently. But he smirked, and that smirk lit a fire inside me I didn't know still existed. Jenny appeared behind him, lips pursed as though I were dirt. She stepped in. "If she bleeds on the tiles, it's your job to clean it," she muttered. I mopped today. As if I were an inconvenience. As if the house I built with my husband belonged to them now. Then little Leia, who once giggled while braiding my hair, leaned over me with her phone raised like I was a circus act. "Grandma glitching," she laughed, filming my arms trying to lift me. "This will get views." The humiliation burned hotter than the spilled water. They laughed, all three, while I lay like a fallen tree that no one cared enough to lift. I wanted to ask when love turned to resentment. I wanted to ask where I failed as a mother. But shame strangled my voice, and only a thin breath escaped. Their laughter faded as they walked away, leaving me alone on the cold floor. I imagined calling out, but the memory of their eyes, cold and bored, kept me silent. Instead, I closed mine and thought of Ethan, my other boy, gone too soon. His voice was gentle, unlike Tyler's. When he was alive, the house felt warm. After he died, emptiness took his place, and Tyler seemed to drink bitterness like water. Minutes passed. Maybe hours, I don't know. The house hummed with appliances, but felt hollow. I realized if I died right there, no one would notice until morning. And maybe they would complain about the mess before they mourned. A strange strength pushed inside me then, not loud like hope but steady like breath. I pressed my palms against the floor and began crawling toward the storage room where they forced me to sleep. Every inch sent pain swarming up my side, but staying still felt worse, like surrendering the last piece of myself. The storage room smelled of old paint and damp boxes. A place for forgotten objects, how fitting they put me there. I reached for the wooden cabinet my late husband, Ray, used to store his tools. My hand slipped, shoulders slamming against it. The door creaked open, odd, because Ray always kept it locked. Inside was a small black metal box. I froze. I hadn't seen it since before he died. He told me once, the night before his surgery, "Martha, if anything ever goes wrong, the code is 310. but only open it if you truly need to. Back then, I never imagined a moment so desperate would come. Yet here I was, old, bruised, unloved in the home I kept alive for decades. My fingers trembled as I pulled the box closer. The dial felt cold like truth waiting to be touched. I turned it slowly. 3, 1, 0. The safe clicked open, gentle yet final, like a breath released after years trapped in a chest. Inside lay things that did not belong in a toolbox: letters tied with ribbon, a journal with Ray's handwriting, a USB, photographs. And beneath them, an envelope with my name, written with the pen stroke of the man who once held my heart steady. For a moment I forgot the pain. The burning on my leg dulled. The humiliation faded behind a new sensation, trembling curiosity. Why would Ray lock away papers? What truth did he fear? I slid the envelope aside and picked up the photographs first. The images were grainy, printed from what looked like security footage. A dark road. A crashed car. 2 figures. My heart stuttered. One was Ethan. The other, Tyler, stepping out of the driver's seat. The next frame showed Ethan reaching toward him, barely moving. And the next showed Tyler walking away. My entire body went cold, colder than the floor that held me earlier. The USB sat silently, heavy with answers. I plugged it into the old laptop Leia discarded months ago. A single audio file appeared. I pressed play, and Ethan's voice, scared, broken, filled the room. "Ty, please come back. I can't move, please." The audio cut off, but the silence afterward screamed louder than any sound. My hand covered my mouth. Tears fell hot and slow. Tyler left him. My sweet Ethan died calling for the brother who abandoned him. And Ray. Ray must have known. Why else would he hide this? I opened the journal next. Ray's handwriting was steady but tired. Notes about Tyler's temper through the years. Appointments with a specialist. Concern, worry, love tangled with regret. He predicted something I refuse to see. If he is not helped, he may turn dangerous. My breath shook reading it. All the moments I brushed off as teenage anger, Ray saw as a warning. He prepared for this. He left me proof for a day justice would be needed. And then, the letter. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it. Ray wrote to me like he knew I would read it alone, hurt, betrayed. He revealed everything: how he discovered Tyler left Ethan, how he stayed silent fearing he would lose both sons, how guilt ate him alive. But he also prepared legal documents inside the box that gave me full rights to the house and inheritance if Tyler ever abused me. "Use these when you no longer recognize the boy we raised," he wrote. "And protect yourself, even if it breaks your heart." I held the letter to my chest, and for the first time in years, I felt something return to me: not power, not revenge, but dignity. They thought they humbled me by pushing me down. But in their cruelty they opened the very door Ray prepared to protect me. Lying on the floor hours earlier, I was just an old woman waiting to be discarded. But now, with truth in my hands, I felt myself rising, maybe not on my feet yet, but inside. That night I called the number Ray left at the bottom of the letter, an attorney named Pierce. My voice was weak, but steady. When he picked up, I whispered, "It's time." And as I said it, a storm that had been silent for years finally began to move. If you think secrets stay buried, you're wrong. Truth waits like a seed under frozen soil, patient, silent, growing roots in the dark. That night, after discovering the box, I called Pierce, the attorney whose number Ray left for emergencies. My voice trembled as I spoke, but not from fear. It was the weight of years finally lifting. He answered with a calm tone, as if he'd been expecting my call all along. I told him everything, my fall, the neglect, the files in the safe, Ethan's recording. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he spoke one quiet sentence that shook me more than any insult ever had. "Mrs. Martha, you are not alone anymore." I cried then, quietly, letting tears fall like warm rain down my face. Not because I was weak, but because after so many years of silence, someone finally heard me. Morning arrived with a dull ache in my bones, but a strange strength beneath it. The house woke slowly, Tyler coughing in the living room, Jenny clattering dishes with irritation, Leah scrolling endlessly on her phone. None of them knew the storm forming behind the thin walls. I sat in the storage room holding the journal on my lap like a fragile pulse. Pages of Ray's handwriting stared back at me. He detailed moments I had forgotten, Tyler breaking Ethan's toy and blaming him, rough arguments, teachers warning us about anger issues. I thought it was boys being boys. I thought love could fix anything. But love is not always enough, and blindness is not kindness. I read his letters until sunlight spilled across the boxes, touching the dust particles like glitter. For the first time, this room didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a waiting place, like a chrysalis forming wings. Hours later, when they were preparing for the housewarming party Jenny arranged, a celebration I wasn't even invited to attend properly, I sat quietly behind the curtain, listening. Jenny ordered new curtains, new dishes, expensive drinks for special guests. She wanted neighbors to admire her, to envy her. She straightened vases and fixed her hair, but never once asked how my bruised leg felt. Tyler walked past me without a glance. He no longer called me Mom. He didn't even call me Martha. I was invisible to them, a shadow walking through a house I paid for. By evening, the garden buzzed with guests. Laughter filled the air like bright confetti, and music played loudly, drowning out uncomfortable thoughts. I sat far in the back, placed deliberately behind tall potted plants so no visitor would notice the unwanted old woman. They gave me a plastic chair instead of a proper seat. People talked about jobs, vacations, car deals, and I sat there wondering how many elders sit silent in their own homes, unseen. If you are old, you'll understand, people talk around you, not to you. Age makes you furniture to many, even family. When the sun dipped low and lanterns glowed warm against the fences, I felt Pierce's presence before I saw him. He walked through the gate wearing a calm suit and a face with purpose. He did not look around like a guest. He walked straight to the center of the yard, opening a black file case with slow precision. Jenny frowned immediately, recognizing authority she couldn't charm. "Excuse me," she said, stepping toward him with a brittle smile. "This is a private party." Pierce nodded politely. "Yes, and I'm here on private family matter. Regarding Mrs. Martha Langford." Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-word. Even the music seemed to lower itself out of respect or fear. Tyler's face shifted first, from confusion to irritation to alarm. "We didn't call you," he snapped. Pierce replied calmly, "Your mother did." And just like that, every eye in the yard turned toward me, the woman they hid in shadows. For the first time in years, I felt the crowd's gaze land full on my body. Some with concern, some with curiosity, some with pity. But I was seen. Pierce lifted the USB from his case like a key to buried ghosts. He connected it to a small projector he brought and aimed it at the smooth patio wall. I watched Tyler pale even before anything appeared. The first image flickered into view, grainy, dark roadside footage. The crashed car. Ethan slumped. Tyler stumbling out. A collective gasp sliced the air like a knife. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another covered her mouth. In the next frame, Ethan's hand reached toward Tyler. The next, Tyler walking away. I heard Jenny suck in breath. Leah froze near the drinks table, her phone lowered for once. Tyler lunged forward. "Turn it off. This is fake." His voice cracked, not strong but desperate. Pierce stepped aside smoothly. "There's more." And he pressed play on the audio file. Ethan's voice filled the speakers, weak, shaking, begging. "Ty, please, come back." Each word stabbed through my chest, but I held myself still. The guests listened in horrified silence. A mother in the crowd began to cry softly. Someone whispered, "How could he leave him like that?" Tyler shouted again, voice breaking like glass. "This means nothing." People panic. But Pierce only opened the next document, Ray's journal. He read short lines aloud. Notes of violent tendencies. Therapy suggestions. A specialist warning. Tyler's face drained like spilled milk, and the yard smelled suddenly of fear instead of barbecue. When Pierce displayed the final document, the legal transfer of the house to me in case of abuse, a wave moved through the crowd. Women shook their heads. Men stared at Tyler like seeing a stranger. Jenny stumbled back, knocking a drink onto her dress, eyes wide in disbelief. She whispered to Tyler, but he didn't listen. His anger boiled. He turned to me, spitting words like poison. "You did this. You want to ruin me." His voice trembled, high and sharp, like a cornered animal. I stood slowly. My knees ached, but I stood anyway, because dignity stands even where bodies fail. "You ruined yourself," I said quietly, and the yard went still. People listened to that old voice they once ignored. Tyler stopped breathing for a second, stunned by the firmness in me. Not screaming. Just truth. And before he could respond, red and blue lights flashed across the fence. Police entered, not rushed, but steady, like people who knew exactly what they came for. They asked for Tyler by full name. He barked, "This is ridiculous." But his voice shook, and guilt clung to him like a shadow that finally found its owner. They announced charges: manslaughter, fleeing accident scene, elder abuse. Words heavy enough to end a life's illusion. Neighbors watched. Friends stepped away. Jenny trembled, mascara streaking her cheeks. Leah cried quietly, staring at the frozen image of Ethan's hand reaching through broken glass. When officers cuffed him, Tyler looked at me, not like a son to a mother, but a boy lost inside a man's mistakes. His eyes asked for rescue. But rescue ends where cruelty begins. I simply said, "Some truths arrive late, but they arrive." And as they led him away, the night tasted different, like justice, bitter but necessary. Guests began leaving one by one, whispering into the cold air. Jenny stood alone, silent at last, understanding too late that love without respect is not love at all. Leah approached me slowly, tears shimmering. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Her voice cracked like her world. I didn't hug her yet. Lessons must settle like seeds before they bloom. I went inside alone. But I wasn't lonely, because the truth walked beside me now, and truth is better company than ungrateful family. I barely slept that night. Not because of fear, but because silence finally sounded different. It wasn't the silence of neglect anymore, it was the silence that comes after a storm, when broken branches lie scattered but the air feels strangely clean. I sat at the edge of my small cot in the storage room, staring at the open safe beside me. The documents, the photos, Ray's journal, all of it felt like pieces of a truth that waited too long to be heard. I touched the leather cover of the journal as if touching my husband's hand through time. Ray had prepared protection for a day I never expected to live. Even now, after everything, I wished he were beside me. But grief changes shape, what used to be pain became strength. His absence was no longer empty, it guided me like a compass pointing home. Morning arrived bright and unforgiving. Sunlight slipped through cracks in the blinds and settled across dust on the floor. The house felt tense. Jenny's muffled sobbing echoed faintly from her room. Leah didn't leave for school, she moved quietly, no filming, no laughter, just silence heavy as guilt. And I, the woman they once hid behind plants, walked through the hallway with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. I made myself tea in the kitchen they never let me use freely anymore. The kettle whistled like a small victory. As I poured my cup, I noticed Jenny standing in the doorway, hair unbrushed, face pale. Her voice was a whisper, stripped of arrogance. "Martha, what happens now?" For the first time, she said my name without annoyance. I didn't answer immediately. I watched the steam rise from my cup like memories leaving my chest. Finally I said, "Now we live with the truth." She swallowed, eyes wet, but guilt alone is not redemption. She stepped closer. "I didn't know everything," she insisted softly. I knew he could be harsh, but I didn't know about Ethan, or the things he did. Her lips trembled. I was wrong. It wasn't forgiveness she wanted, it was relief from shame. But forgiveness is not handed out like spare change. It grows slowly, if it grows at all. I walked past her without anger, only clarity. "Knowing isn't the same as caring," I said. "You saw me fall and you filmed your life instead of offering a hand." Her shoulders dropped as though the truth weighed heavier than any accusation. Behind her, I saw Leah standing farther down the hallway. She approached cautiously, like a child nearing a wound. Her voice cracked, tiny and sincere. "Grandma, I didn't understand how much it hurt. I thought it was just jokes. Everyone online laughs at things like that." She blinked fast, tears gathering. "But you're not something to laugh at." I looked at her, really looked. The girl who once braided my hair, who used to sleep curled against my arm when thunderstorms scared her. Cruelty hadn't been born in her, it had grown quietly through imitation and neglect. Something inside me softened, not forgiveness, but the beginning of a door opening. I reached out and touched her cheek gently. She cried harder, folding herself into my arms with the kind of sob that comes when innocence meets consequence. I held her, not because she earned it, but because she still had time to grow different than her parents. That afternoon, Pierce returned with paperwork. He treated me not as a fragile old woman, but as a client with authority. He placed documents on the dining table, my dining table, and explained in simple terms that the house now belonged to me legally, fully, without contest. Years of mortgage I paid, years of cooking, cleaning, raising children under this roof, now recognized by law. He handed me a pen. Signing my name felt like reclaiming my own breath. Ink spread across the paper like a new beginning. Jenny watched from across the room, silent, folding her hands together as though praying. After Pierce left, I stood in the living room alone. The framed family photographs Jenny removed years ago had been thrown out, but I found one of Ethan and Ray in a drawer. I placed it on the mantel. The moment I did, the house seemed to breathe differently, less like theirs, more like mine. I walked room to room, noticing every stain and crack, every corner where laughter once lived. Tyler's absence echoed, but it wasn't sorrowful, it was necessary. Where cruelty stood, justice now filled the space like light through broken curtains. Days passed. There were hearings, statements, endless papers. Tyler called once from holding, voice raw with desperation. The phone rang through the house like a ghost knocking. Jenny answered, and I heard only her side of the conversation. Pleading. Crying. Denying. When she handed me the phone, her hand shook. He wants to speak with you. I held the receiver but did not raise it to my ear. I listened to Tyler breathing on the other end, broken, perhaps finally seeing consequences. After a moment, I placed the phone down gently, without a word. Not out of cruelty, but because some apologies must be spoken to silence first. One evening, Leah entered the storage room. She looked around, seeing it clearly for the first time, the cold floor, the thin blanket, the old paint cans. Her voice broke. You lived here? We made you sleep here? No one forced me to answer. The room itself did. She cried again, but this time not like a child seeking comfort, she cried like someone realizing they carry a part of the hurt. She helped me move into the guest room that night without being asked. A week later, something extraordinary happened. Leah brought me her phone, not to film me, but to show me a video she made. It wasn't for mockery, but for apology. In shaky voice she said to the camera, "This is my grandmother. We treated her wrong. I want to be better." She asked if she could post it, not for sympathy but awareness. I hesitated at first, worried strangers would throw stones instead of flowers. But then I remembered, silence protects cruelty. Stories save others. So I nodded. The video gained attention. Not viral for entertainment, but for truth. People commented with memories of their own grandparents, regrets, love, guilt. Messages poured in, children promising to call their elders, strangers thanking an old woman they never met. I read them at night, each message a small stitch closing old wounds. Some asked for more stories. They wanted to hear how love and betrayal shape a life. And I realized maybe my voice still had purpose beyond pain. One afternoon, when the sun bathed the living room in gold, Jenny approached timidly with paperwork in hand. "I'll move out if you want," she said quietly. "You don't have to, but I understand if," I stopped her with a slow breath. "You may stay for now," I said, "but respect must be the foundation from this day forward." She nodded, relief and remorse tangled in her eyes. Not forgiven, but given a chance. I spent evenings reading Ray's journal cover to cover. His fears, his regrets, his love for both sons, even Tyler, despite everything. He never wanted hatred to bloom. He wanted healing. And maybe, in my old age, I could honor him by choosing not revenge, but accountability. Life shifted gently. The house was rearranged, not with new furniture, but with new understanding. Leah accompanied me on walks. Jenny cooked dinner sometimes and asked how my day was. Small steps, unsteady, but steps nonetheless. The pain of the past didn't vanish, but it softened, like bruises turning yellow. What surprised me most was how strength returns quietly to those who survive storms. I felt taller, not in height but in spirit. I no longer waited for kindness, I carried it myself. I spoke at community centers about elder neglect. I shared my story with trembling voice, but each time I spoke, it trembled less. People listened. Some cried. Some hugged me after. I realized my suffering wasn't just a wound, it was a warning, a light for others. Still, one piece remained unfinished, the day I would visit Tyler. But that is part of the story still ahead, and truth, like healing, does not come all at once. It arrives step by step, like dawn after the longest night. Healing is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive like rain or thunder. It comes like morning light, slow, gentle, unnoticed at first, until suddenly the world looks different. Weeks passed since the party that changed everything, and the house was no longer the hostile battlefield it once felt like. It wasn't perfect, but it breathed. I had space again, my own bedroom with clean sheets and sunlight touching the curtains. Leah often sat with me in the evenings, asking about old times, about her grandfather's jokes, about Ethan's shy smile. Sometimes she cried over the memories she never valued while they were alive in this house. I held her hand, not to erase guilt, but to guide her through it. Pain can teach, if we let it. Jenny tried in her own clumsy way to make amends, cooking dinner without sighs, offering me the armchair she once called hers, even asking if I needed help with my medication. Her efforts were not smooth, nor consistent. Some days she slipped into silence, avoiding my eyes, perhaps drowning in remorse. Other days she hovered with awkward kindness. I didn't push forgiveness onto her, nor resentment. I simply allowed time to speak for me. You can't rewrite a heart overnight, but you can decide which direction it grows. Pierce visited again with updates on Tyler's case. I listened quietly as he explained hearings, statements, court dates, the possibility of reduced sentencing if remorse was shown. Words like rehabilitation and emotional neglect filled the room like dust in sunlight. I nodded at everything, yet inside me, a different storm moved. Tyler was still my child, even if he had become the architect of my suffering. Love doesn't disappear when someone hurts you. It just learns to stand instead of kneel. One evening, after Pierce left, I sat alone in the living room staring at the photo of Ethan. His smile in the picture was small but real, as if he knew life would be unfair but still chose kindness. I touched his face through the glass. My heart whispered a question I had avoided: how do I face the son who killed you in silence? The answer came quietly, with truth. A truth not rooted in fury, but in closure. The next morning, I asked Leah to accompany me to the detention center. She didn't question why, she only nodded with soft understanding. The drive there was long, fields rolling endlessly beside the road, winter grass bending in the wind. I watched the landscape and thought of time, how it moves without pity, how it carries people to places they never imagined. Tyler was once a baby who clung to my finger. Now he awaited trial behind walls. We waited in a sterile lobby smelling of disinfectant and old paper. When the guard called my name, my heart thrummed like a slow drumbeat. Leah squeezed my hand before I walked into the visitation room. And then I saw him, Tyler, sitting behind a glass window, orange uniform dulling the man who once wore laughter like armor. His shoulders hunched, his eyes hollow, as though he had finally seen the darkness he lived in. When our eyes met, time didn't rewind. It didn't soften the past. But it froze, allowing space for words buried for years. He picked up the phone slowly. I mirrored him. His voice cracked the moment it reached my ears. Mom. That single word, fragile and trembling, carried a lifetime of meaning, love lost, guilt grown. I didn't speak first. I wanted him to unravel, to face truth without me guiding his excuses. He swallowed hard. I didn't plan any of this. I was scared that night. Ethan, he wasn't moving. I panicked. I ran. I lied. His breath shook. And then it was too late to undo. Pain tightened around my chest, but not fresh pain, the old kind that no longer bleeds, just aches. I asked softly, "And what about me?" He closed his eyes. A tear escaped. I was angry at life. Angry that you loved him more. My heart flinched. I loved you both, I whispered. But love feels different to those who refuse to hold it. He cried openly, shoulders trembling. I don't know how I became this. His voice cracked on the edge of a boy I once knew. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was no longer cruel, it was honest. And honesty hurts, but it heals too. I finally said, I came here not to punish you. That's already happening. Tyler looked up, eyes wide with fragile hope. Then why? My answer came from a place deeper than bitterness. To tell you that change is still possible. For you, if you choose it. But you must live with the truth, not bury it under anger. His lips trembling, he whispered, "Can you forgive me?" Forgiveness is not a switch one flips. It is a journey walked with slow steps. I answered truthfully, "Not today. But I am willing to try." He nodded, tears falling silently. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, I said. But it's what your brother would have wanted. When I left the room, I felt neither victorious nor defeated. I felt human again, capable of pain, of love, of boundaries. Leah hugged me the moment I stepped out. On the drive home, she held my hand almost the entire way. Not out of guilt, but out of understanding. Life gradually found rhythm. I started attending community gatherings again. People invited me to tell my story, some with empathy, some with shock, some with a desire to learn. I spoke about neglect, about aging, about how easy it is to forget the hands that once fed us. My words carried weight, not because they were loud, but because they were lived. After one talk, a woman approached with shaking voice. She said she would bring her mother back home, that she hadn't visited in months. Another man promised to call his grandmother that night. I felt something warm settle in my chest, a light Ethan's memory helped ignite. At home, Leah began spending more time near me, bringing books, asking for stories of my youth. We baked together, clumsy but joyful. She recorded videos of us cooking, not for mockery but for sharing memories. Comments flooded again, people admiring, thanking, reflecting. Jenny sometimes watched from the doorway, guilt and gratefulness fighting in her eyes. One night as I stirred soup, she whispered without meeting my gaze, "Thank you for not throwing us out." I paused, tasting the moment like broth on my tongue. "People deserve a chance to change," I said. "But change must be proven, not spoken." She nodded, tears gathering again. She washed dishes in silence beside me, the clutter softer than ever before. Still, some nights I stood by the window with Ray's journal in my hands, reading his regrets and dreams. I imagined him beside me, smiling in that gentle way, telling me I did well, that I survived what many would break under. I whispered into the empty room, "I hope I made you proud." And though no voice answered, the house felt warmer, as if he heard. Life was settling, healing slowly like cracked earth after rain. But one more chapter remained. A chapter not of courts or punishment, but of building something new from broken soil. I didn't know yet what the future would hold. But for the first time in years, I believed it could hold something kind. And that belief kept growing like spring inside an old woman's chest. Spring crept into my life quietly, like forgiveness arriving through a cracked door. The days became gentler. The house no longer felt like a cage, but a place where breath returned. I began waking to the smell of breakfast again, sometimes made by Jenny, sometimes by Leah, sometimes by my own hands just because they no longer trembled from fear. Sunlight stretched across the floors like warm paint, and the room seemed wider now that silence was not filled with dread. I planted flowers in the backyard, marigolds, lilies, and a single rose bush for Ethan. I pressed my fingers into the soil, feeling life beneath the dirt, something growing where loss once lived. Tyler remained in custody awaiting trial, but letters began coming, written in shaky handwriting, each one an attempt to stitch wounds that took years to tear open. Some letters apologized, some begged, some simply talked about memories of him and Ethan climbing trees or the way Ray whistled while building furniture. I read them all. Not because forgiveness is easy, but because refusing to read would keep me chained to anger. I wrote back, not with devotion, but with honesty. I told him pain doesn't vanish but can be shaped into something that teaches instead of destroys. He wrote again, saying he joined counseling inside, that he now realizes what grief twisted him into. I did not absolve him. But I let him speak. Meanwhile, life at home wove itself into something new. Leah transformed the way young hearts can when they are shown truth at the right time. She sat beside me with notebooks, asking for stories of my childhood, of Ray's first letter to me, of the day each child was born. Her questions weren't for entertainment, they were for rebuilding lineage. She deleted every old video mocking me and made new ones of our slow walks, me teaching her how to sew, us cooking Ethan's favorite soup. Comments flooded with warmth, people telling her she grew beautifully, that changes strength. I saw healing in her eyes. She smiled more softly now, with meaning instead of mockery. Jenny was different too. No more clipped tone, no more harsh footsteps down the hall. She tried hard, though awkwardly, to repair what she broke. She baked cookies and asked if they were too sweet. She folded my laundry neatly and left tea by my bedside without words. One evening, she knocked softly before entering my room. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, voice trembling, but I want to earn it with every day I have left here. I watched her stand there, guilt heavy on her shoulders like a wet coat. Forgiveness is not a gift, I said gently. It's something time grows when actions water it. She nodded with damp eyes and sat beside me quietly. Not as a rival, but as a woman learning how to be human again. In the months that followed, I worked with Pierce to establish something meaningful. A foundation under Ethan's name, scholarships for children needing therapy, school support, or simply a safe place to express pain. I went to the bank with trembling hands but a steady soul, signing documents that made me feel like I was breathing purpose again. The mayor heard of the story and invited me to speak at an awareness event about elder neglect. I stood at the podium truly seen, my voice quivering at first, then rising as I spoke of invisible suffering behind closed doors. The audience listened, some crying quietly, some bowing their heads. When I finished, applause rose like wind carrying seeds far beyond where they fell. Later, a young woman approached me. She said my story saved her mother, that she called her mother the same night and brought her back home. "You changed us," she whispered. Something inside me softened, an ache replaced by warmth. I realized pain had purpose, not to bury me, but to let others rise. One quiet afternoon, I sat in the living room, tea warming my palms, when a memory surfaced, Ethan's humming in the hallway. Soft, uncertain, but kind. Sometimes grief imitates presence so well that you almost answer it. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We're okay now, my boy." And I felt, whether imagined or carried by love, a gentle lightness like a hand on my shoulder. The kind ray used to give when words weren't needed. When Tyler's sentencing day came, I went alone by choice. The courthouse was cold, marble echoing footsteps like time itself. Tyler entered in cuffs, thinner, older in eyes. He searched for me in the crowd like a drowning man searching for shore. When his eyes met mine, he didn't plead, he simply nodded, grateful I came. The judge spoke long about accountability, about lives affected, about consequences deferred too long. Tyler received years in custody, with counseling and rehabilitation required. When he turned to leave, I stood. He paused, hope flickering like a candle in wind. I didn't say freedom. I didn't say forgiveness. I simply said, grow into someone Ethan would be proud of. His tears fell, and he bowed his head. That was closure, not happily ever after, but truth set down like a heavy stone finally placed where it belongs. I returned home to a house that now felt like mine again. Birds perched on the backyard fence. Leah watered the rose bush with care, talking to Ethan's memory as if he could hear. Jenny hung curtains I chose this time. We cooked dinner together, slow, peaceful, present. At night, they sat with me on the porch, listening to cicadas as the sun set behind fading clouds. The air smelled like rain far away, the good kind that nourishes soil instead of flooding it. I rocked in my chair, arthritis nagging but heart calm. Life didn't return to what it was. It grew into something new, scarred, but blooming. Sometimes I read Ray's journal just to feel close to him. Sometimes I replied to Tyler's letters, slow and measured, letting redemption be a road he walks, not a door I open. And every morning, I place fresh flowers by Ethan's photo, whispering stories of what his memory built. Pain birthed something meaningful. Suffering opened eyes. Truth mended what lies shattered. And me? I am old, yes, bones aching, hair silver, but age is not weakness. My voice carries now in spaces I once sat silent in. People listen. Children call me grandma even if they aren't mine. Neighbors visit for advice. I tell them my story, not as tragedy but as proof that even in broken homes, strength can still bloom like roses pushing through cracked concrete. If you sat with me through this long tale, thank you. You kept company with a heart that once believed it no longer mattered. And if my story reaches even one soul who needs it, one child who calls their grandmother tonight, one family who chooses kindness, one old woman who stands up from the cold floor of neglect, then every tear I shed was not wasted. Sometimes the world cracks us open so light can travel through. And I, an old woman sitting in a chair on a quiet porch, have found peace, not because life was gentle, but because I chose to rise anyway.